This is a second thought video made possible by Squarespace. Make your next move with a beautiful website from Squarespace. So, you're bored with life on Earth and want to live somewhere new. Understandable, but where to go? The moon? Nah, too close to home. Mars? Too obvious. Everyone wants to go to Mars. What about Venus? It's close enough to get there in just a few months, more exotic than Mars, and you never hear about anyone trying to visit Venus. It's been over 30 years since the Soviet Union landed their last unmanned craft on its surface. It's settled. You'll move to Venus. You pack your favorite belongings and take off in your rocket. About 3.5 months later, you arrive at your new home. It's not much to look at from space, as Venus is always covered in thick clouds. Oh well, you're sure it's nice down below the cloud cover. As your landing craft descends through the thick clouds, your instruments give you some not-so-good news. The clouds are made up of toxic sulfur dioxide, and it's a little windier than you'd like, with wind speeds reaching over 350 kilometers per hour. That's okay, it'll probably be calmer below the clouds, right? As you move closer to the surface, the temperature begins to rise and you enter a thick haze. The sulfur dioxide rains down from above, but the temperature here 30 miles below the cloud tops is so high that the rain instantly evaporates into a poisonous haze of sulfuric acid over 10 miles thick. At this point, you're probably getting a little nervous, and with good reason. The temperature is 315 degrees Celsius and climbing fast. As your craft touches down on Venusian soil, the temperature has reached 465 degrees Celsius, hot enough to melt lead, and the pressure clocks in at 92 times that of sea level on Earth, the same pressure you'd feel over a mile under Earth's oceans. To make things worse, it's very difficult to see. The atmosphere reflects over 90% of the light that hits it, keeping the surface shrouded in permanent twilight. If you think you just picked the wrong spot to land, think again. The whole planet stays this incredible temperature and pressure year-round all over the surface. Okay, let's ignore the fact that your craft would likely be completely melted and crushed within minutes of touching down, and you with it. Let's say you establish a pleasant little home on the surface of Venus. What kind of life would you live? For starters, you'd have to get used to a day on Venus being longer than a year. Since the planet is so close to the Sun, it only takes 225 Earth days to complete an orbit, but Venus also rotates very slowly, and one full rotation takes 243 Earth days. That means you could celebrate your birthday twice every Venusian day. You'd also feel a bit lighter than back on Earth. That's because Venus only has about 90% of Earth's gravity, and that's about it for the positives. The atmosphere of your new home is incredibly toxic, meaning you could never take off your spacesuit outside your habitat, assuming it even produces oxygen. You really couldn't even leave your habitat without simultaneously melting and being crushed into oblivion. But what if you didn't live on the surface? What if you lived in a floating habitat above the cloud layer? As you travel back up through the thick atmosphere, the temperature begins to drop, reaching a much more reasonable 75 degrees Celsius. That's still hot, but well within the human limit for survival with protective equipment. The pressure also stabilizes around 1 Earth atmosphere. You'd still need oxygen tanks, or a habitat that provides breathable air and protection from the heat and occasional acidic rain. But other than that, you'd have a fairly safe lifestyle. Your habitat would be blown around the planet at over 300 kilometers an hour, but there's nothing to bump into, so you'd be completely safe as long as your habitat is structurally sound and can withstand the corrosive effects of sulfuric acid. The biggest problems you would face in your new home would be how to produce food and water. If you could get the water, food would then be easy, since the atmosphere is rich in CO2, which could be used to grow crops after filtering out the sulfuric acid. Getting your hands on water could be pretty tricky though, since Venus is almost entirely devoid of water in any form. The sulfuric acid and sulfur dioxide vapor clouds do contain trace amounts of water, but it would have to be heavily treated and filtered before it would be safe for use. Alternative sources include shipping water all the way from Earth or collecting it from nearby asteroids, both of which would be incredibly expensive and difficult. But if you can manage it, you'd be all set in your new home above the clouds. No obnoxious neighbors to deal with, peace and quiet, and a whole planet to call your own. Until everybody else catches on and snatches up that sweet flying real estate. Oh well, looks like you'll have to move again. While you search for the next planet to call home, you should keep track of all your research with a professional website from Squarespace, so your lander doesn't end up melting on arrival. With Squarespace, it's not rocket science to create your own personal website. Squarespace has tons of easy-to-edit templates created by world-class designers to get your shiny new website up and running in a matter of hours. These days, it's so important to have a web presence to show off your work, sell merchandise, or just to be noticed. And thanks to Squarespace, it's a whole lot easier than you might expect. So if you want to start a blog, sell a product, or make a cool website to sell real estate on Pluto, I can't recommend Squarespace highly enough. To check out Squarespace and support Second Thought, visit squarespace.com/secondthought today. If you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing to support the channel and keep up to date on the latest content, and click the little bell to be notified every time I release a new video. You can watch the rest of my space-related content by clicking here, or if you're really bored, you can binge watch all my content by clicking here. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next week.